Imagine a game so misguided in its conceptualization and direction that just 6 months after launch, they have been forced to scale back certain modes and drop support for others outright. That's the state of Battlefield 2042, ladies and gentlemen, whose player count is still looking pretty rough. It is looking a little better in the high 2000s instead of the low 2000s in terms of 24-hour peak average, but that's still far from ideal for a live service, one of this scale no less, one that requires a lot of players to matchmake in order for this to be a viable long-term live service. It's looking less and less likely that this game will survive for long, though I guess only time will tell. As for what I mean by some of its regressions, well, here's a report from TechRadar whose headline reads, Battlefield 2042 has lost one of its biggest selling points, and that is 128 player support for Breakthrough. This was also reported by news outlet Rock Paper Shotgun, who went into further detail describing how Breakthrough mode can no longer be played with 128 players. It is now limited to 64. And here's the justification that the developers provided. Our leading change is the removal of the 128 player version of Breakthrough. When reviewing the available experiences in All-Out Warfare, we felt that the 128 player modes are better suited for Conquest, where gameplay spaces are larger and where you have a more natural fit for sandbox gameplay. And they thought that reducing Breakthrough to 64 players would offer a more tactical experience with less chaos. Now, depending on who you ask, this is either a good change or a bad change. Some say that 128 players was too chaotic and that scaling that down might make it just a lot more palatable than with 128 players. Others are saying that they enjoy the chaos of 128 players and are going to miss the ability to play that mode with that player count. But in general, it just seem as though the 128 player implementation, the design around that many players just wasn't well done as a whole in Battlefield 2042. I believe it is possible to make fun gameplay out of 128 players in a match. Battlefield 2042, in terms of its gameplay and map design, doesn't do a good job at capitalizing that player count. And then the other major regression is that Battlefield 2042 has ceased development of Hazard Zone content. Hazard Zone, you may recall, is Battlefield 2042's take on squad-based Battle Royale, and the justification provided by the development team states as follows. All of us on the team had great ambition and high hopes for this new Battlefield experience throughout our development, but we're the first to hold our hands up and acknowledge that it hasn't found the right home in Battlefield 2042, and that will benefit greatly from letting our focus and energy stay on the modes we see you engaging with the most. Recall that Hazard Zone was one of the most promoted aspects of Battlefield 2042 during its marketing phase, and then the game launched and very few people ultimately engaged with this mode. There's this perception among AAA publishers that shoving Battle Royale into anything will lead to immediate success, but both Battlefield 5 and now Battlefield 2042 have failed to implement a fun and long-term Battle Royale mode. Both of those games, Battle Royales, very quickly fell apart due to a lack of interest and just due to an inability to stand out from the established Battle Royales that people tend to go to for the most fun experience in that genre. So in the grand scheme of things, them seizing development on a mode that nobody played is relatively inconsequential, I suppose, but it doesn't change the fact that a big portion of development went into this mode that is now being abandoned, and it's just this waste of time that could have gone into making a proper Battlefield experience, one that actually feels like Battlefield instead of the specialists-ridden game here that tries to imitate Apex Legends or Call of Duty Warzone or, Overwatch and Rainbow Six Siege, you name it. As for where all of these details are coming from, well, here we have a forum post from the developers that talks about upcoming updates, the roadmap. They even have a video version of their latest Battlefield briefing. And then scrolling further down, they'll detail what they're focusing on, namely updating maps so that there's more cover and it looks a little dirtier, because right now Battlefield 2042 looks way too clean for a setting that was ravaged by war and environmental cataclysms. And so as you scroll down, you'll see a bunch of comparisons of the old version of the map versus the new version, which adds some more obstacles here and there and some additional detailings here and there. I don't know if this is going to be substantial enough to bring players back in the grand scheme of things. To me, this all looks fairly minor overall, and it still looks like a case of too little too late. But I suppose only time will tell. And then beyond that, we've got updates to things like character models, where they're trying to make them, I don't know, I guess just look a bit more in line with the setting that they describe. Even admitting that some of those quips that the specialists say at the end that makes them seem like they're having so much fun playing this laser tag session instead of them understanding the environment that they're in. They said that stuff's going to be replaced with lines that are tonally more consistent with the synopsis of Battlefield 2042. And then scrolling further down, you got some updates on animation like turning and running when going from side to side, or when sprinting diagonally, or when just making a turn. They're adding some extra bits of animation. And then last but not least, towards the bottom, they posted this screenshot of the roadmap they currently have in place, and we can check that out right here. And fans are overall pretty disappointed at the offering here. You've got the May 4.1 update, which isn't really a content addition. It's a regression of a mode that was too big for its own good because they didn't design the mode properly around 128 players, so they're just reducing that back down to 64 players. And then throughout June, July, and August, you got Season 1 stuff. You're going to get one new map, a new specialist, some new weapons, new vehicles, new battle pass, more weekly missions, more portal featured experiences, more community spotlights, alongside the animation improvements and traversal improvements, and an update to one of the maps, which are better than nothing, but fans are quick to point out how much more content and how much more substantial updates past games have gotten in a similar time period. This doesn't feel like building upon a solid and established foundation. This feels like they're still setting up the foundation, which is not a good look when your game has already been out for many, many months. And then you've got a glimpse at Season 2, which will include another map update and an overhauling of specialists in terms of look and feel. Though what people were actually hoping for is that they would get rid of specialists outright. That doesn't seem to be happening, which many fans are dismayed by, given that specialists just feel so far outside the realm of what Battlefield's identity is. And I don't know if it's a matter of the developers being stubborn about making specialists work, or if specialists are such a fundamental part of how they built Battlefield 2042 that it's just not possible for them to outright get rid of specialists, so they're trying to just like find a workaround. Either way, people are not happy about the prospect of specialists remaining a core aspect of the Battlefield experience. Suffice to say that the community overall isn't particularly enthusiastic about the future of Battlefield 2042. In fact, if you go to the PC Gaming subreddit and check out this thread highlighting the Battlefield briefing, you can see 0 upvotes. People have been downvoting this thread, and comments include watching a $60 full release AAA game develop in real time like it's in early access. That is, in reality, what this feels like. And then you've got somebody else describing the bleak reality of Battlefield 2042's current situation. So they've deleted 2 of their main game modes from the game within the past week. A 128-player breakthrough was removed a few days ago, and today they've announced they'll no longer support Hazard Zone and are dropping making maps for 128 players entirely. They also make it near impossible to consistently play any other game modes than Conquest and Breakthrough. Want to play TDM or Rush? Too bad. Those modes aren't available on the day you want to play them. Instead, they rotate in and out based on what the developers want. The roadmap they've released today shows Season 1 will begin in June and will only include one single map until Season 2 begins in September. That means this live service game will have gone 11 months and only had one map added to it. Yeah, when you really put it into perspective, this is pretty awful. But of course, you can expect the cosmetic shop will be overflowing with stuff to buy, says another Reddit user. And yeah, that's unfortunately the way these things go. Monetization will always be priority number 1, despite the fact that we're looking at a game that hasn't even justified its base premium price of $60, $70 plus, depending on which edition you bought. Any form of selling microtransactions at this stage of the game in its current rough, unpolished, and underbaked state is an insult to customers and players, if you ask me. This latest Battlefield briefing is also being discussed on the official Battlefield 2042 subreddit. Here we have the post here, which doesn't have as many upvotes as you'd think if this were being received positively. And then scrolling down, plenty of people are criticizing the current roadmap and the current state of things. I like how Season 1's timeline is a structure for beta development, pretty much what this other user said about how this just feels like we're watching a AAA game develop in real time like it's in early access. Next up, we got somebody else saying, this shows us again how unfinished the game was at launch. I still feel scammed, but maybe we get a finished product in 2 years. I don't know how to feel about this. Others are baffled that in all this time, we're only getting one map when other Battlefield games have gotten so much more content in the months following their launch. And then we got one more post here that paints the bleak picture of Battlefield 2042 right now. So basically, they're working on that extra year of dev time the game should have had to begin with, while also cramming in whatever scraps of content they can squeeze and recycle from Portal to justify getting their seasons out, so that maybe this will become a decent Battlefield game in time for them to cut support and announce the next one, which is exactly what happened to Battlefield 5. Just as the game was getting to an adequate enough place, they cut support short. They didn't deliver on the war stories that they were supposed to, and they just moved on to the next entry. And what that meant was that the folks who were loyal to Battlefield 5, who did wait for the game to eventually get good and finally started to see the game get good, felt cheated that the wait was ultimately not worth it. Now, this user does emphasize that, to be clear, the changes do all look promising. These are ultimately not necessarily net negatives overall, especially the specialist redesigns and adding cover to the maps and making Rush permanent, but it's clear DICE is going to get their 4 seasons out and drop it. We'll be lucky to get more than a map per season, I would suspect. Basically saying these updates aren't bad, they just feel so insubstantial for the amount of time that it's taking them to release these updates, that it just feels like they're doing the bare minimum before the game peters out. And with how disillusioned the Battlefield 2042 community seems to be with the latest update communicated by EA and DICE, you're seeing headlines like Major Battlefield 2042 update leaves remaining fans dismayed. DICE's roadmap for the next 12 months seems awfully thin. As for the kinds of community responses we're seeing to this, particularly on the Battlefield 2042 subreddit, here we have one fan posting this meme where the developer state, "We're not walking away from specialists," and here we have Obi-Wan saying, "Well, then you are lost." And the headline itself reads, "From my point of view, the specialists are evil." Indeed, specialists have been one of the most contentious aspects of Battlefield 2042, and from what I'm seeing, the majority seem to agree that they do not belong in Battlefield and that they should get rid of them completely if they want any chance for Battlefield 2042 to see a resurgence. But their stubbornness or inability to get rid of specialists outright is just proving to be a major detriment. Here's another Reddit user highlighting just how much content Battlefield 4 got in the same time period that Battlefield 2042 has been out so far, and what the roadmap presents. One new map in 1 year after release. Congrats, DICE and EA. Look what your antecessors were able to deliver. And indeed, you can see how with Battlefield 4, not only did it kick off strong, but every month or couple of months, you'd see a substantial content update with major additions to the game. People discussing what a waste it was for Battlefield 2042 to focus on Hazard Zone. Here's somebody who is reporting on how Hazard Zone has officially been discontinued, and here's somebody else emphasizing how this is the second Battlefield game, the second attempt, the second failure at a Battle Royale type of addition to Battlefield, referring to both Battlefield 5 and Battlefield 2042. Last but not least, as far as changing specialist appearance goes, here we have a Reddit user emphasizing that the non-specialist characters already look like the ideal versions of what Battlefield playable characters and soldiers should look like. DICE out here remodeling faces and re-recording voice lines when the characters we want to play as have been sitting in the game since launch. So yeah, this is where the discourse is at after the latest communication from DICE. It's just a whole lot of pessimism, a whole lot of thinking about what could have been, imagining the potential that was squandered by a rushed launch and misguided concepts and direction for a series that should have remained Battlefield instead of trying to lean into these other trends that this game seems to be trying to chase. But ultimately, it shot itself in the foot. And now they're trying to course correct, but in doing so, they're only at a point where they're fixing the foundation instead of building upon a foundation that should have been set at launch. When people say this feels like we're watching early access or beta develop in real time, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment of what's going on here. And with how long it's taking for these updates to occur and with how much they have to catch up on. Again, for my part, I am very skeptical that Battlefield 2042 has any kind of a healthy long-term future ahead. But that's just me. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on this latest communication and update provided by the developers, and what you think prospects look like for Battlefield 2042 after seeing the latest roadmap and what community sentiments are generally like. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.